On video, I promise. Shall we get started? All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the people who've been here before, and welcome to everybody who's new. I'm Sean Law. There's Ben Zeitlin. There's also Marcus Sherman floating around somewhere. Oh, in the back. We are the co-organizers of PyData and Arbor. As always, we'd love to acknowledge people. So NumFocus for sponsoring our meetup, as well as TD Ameritrade, which is where I work. This is the space that you're in for hosting the location, the venue, and also Midas for sponsoring the food. So make sure that you show your appreciation whenever you can. A couple of important points: emergency exits for those who are new. In case of emergency, there's an exit right here, and one to the right as you move out the front doors here. We're always looking for speakers, not only for our lightning talks, but for our monthly meetup talks. So if we missed you for the lightning talks, please feel free to reach out to us or just talk to us directly if you'd like to give a talk. And always provide feedback, things that we're doing right, but more importantly, things that we're doing wrong or could improve upon. We'd love to hear that feedback. Either email us or send us a tweet at PyData Ann Arbor, or send us an email at pydatannarbor@gmail.com. Because of the nature of the lightning talks, we might allow one question, if any. What do you think?
I don't know. We have a strict deadline of 10 minutes. You're going to get booted off.
Okay. How about we do this? If you end earlier than your 10 minutes, then you get one question.
Yeah. Maybe a cheeky question.
Yeah. But if you take up your full time, then no question.
No question.
And Ben is going to be monitoring this, and he will play a special song as you've gone over.
Yeah.
So you will know what that song is. So yeah, no questions. Try not to have any questions. And also remember that this is a borrowed space, so please clean up after yourselves because of the food. If you see some trash, help out. Code of conduct, because we do have new people here. I'd like to read the PyData Code of Conduct for everybody, especially our speakers, to know that I'm hoping that you have read it and acknowledge this. But PyData is dedicated to providing a harassment-free meeting experience for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, or religion. We do not tolerate harassment of meeting participants in any form. All communication should be appropriate for a professional audience, including people of many different backgrounds. Sexual language and imagery is not appropriate for any of our meetup events. Be kind to others. Do not insult or put down other attendees. Behave professionally. Remember that harassment and sexist, racist, or exclusionary jokes are not appropriate for PyData. Attendees violating these rules may be asked to leave the meetup at the sole discretion of the meetup organizers. Thank you all for helping to make this a welcoming and friendly event for everybody. So thank you. Quick icebreaker, because we want people to be able to leave here at least having known somebody. So today, either turn to somebody on your left or your right, introduce yourselves, and either tell them your favorite sport to play or your favorite sport to watch. Go ahead. That is exactly it. That's what I thought.
Right. It's also probably better when they can play in the Meetup.
And you want to wear the fancy socks.
All right, thank you. And we're back. Thank you. So hopefully you will be able to leave here today at least knowing one other person at this meetup. As always, we like to also point out a data science, month in data science. This isn't really something that just came out. It's probably came out. It's been out for a while, but I think it was open source recently. So there's this thing called QPy or QP, which is a drop-in replacement for NumPy, but that leverages GPUs, right? So you can check that out. People have tried to solve this problem. There's also other tools like Accelerate coming out of Anaconda. But definitely check this out. People have been playing with this. There's a lot of news about it. And also, I wanted to point out, also thanks to, again, to Midas for the food, but Midas is hosting their Data-Driven World, Potentials and Pitfalls. It's a Midas Symposium tomorrow, Wednesday, October 11th, at the University of Michigan. So if you want to check that out, I think there's a couple of people here that will be attending. We will be attending. I know Brandon Eubank from our TD Ameritrade, and also his boss, Beaumont Vance, will be part of some panel there tomorrow. So check that out. Also, I don't know if Alexander or I know Dan Pressel is in here, but the A2 Deep Learning Group, they have an annual deep learning, I guess, day or two meeting. It's going to be at on the university campus. So definitely search for that and sign up for their event. It's held on Saturday, November 18th, and it's between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. So they'll have a bunch of people giving talks about deep learning. So if you want to learn more. Last but not least, I know Stephanie is here, over there, right? But there's an advertisement for Ann Arbor Data Dive, which is hosted by the University of Michigan School of Information. I've participated in the last 2 years as a way to volunteer. So it's partnering up with, Ann Arbor Data Dive, the group is a group at the university that works with local nonprofits across Michigan to help them solve some sort of data problem. This year, they will be hosting a series of boot camps in the morning for people who are getting into data science. And then I think by about lunchtime, you can take part in their sort of data hackathon is probably the best way to put it. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great energy, and good food. So go check it out. And it's going to be on Saturday, November 11th. And you can sign up at learn more at a2datadive.org. Did I miss anything, Stephanie?
No, it's all. Feel free to come talk to me afterward if you have questions.
Yes. And as always, TD Ameritrade, we are hiring. I'm going to point out my buddy here, Brandon Eubank. Do you want to put your hand up? So Brandon is one of the hiring managers. So if you're looking for a job, he's hiring for a bunch of different roles. I think you'll see some job posting papers to his right along the window there. But he might have placed some. That's it? Okay. But definitely reach out to and stick around afterwards and talk to Brandon if you're interested in any roles. We're hiring for my team. We're looking for a sort of a consultant level developer, but for doing research and development on the advanced technology team here at TD Ameritrade. And also plug for our next event. We've got David Rogers from Site Machine, a company here in I guess they have an office here in Ann Arbor. And the title of his talk is Delivering Data Products for Operations. And this is on Tuesday, November 14th. So we're trying to switch to Tuesdays for our meetups. So please sign up for that. And with that, we'll probably get started. Did I miss anything? Good. So our first speaker is Olga. You'll have to help me with your last name.
Yep. Give it a try. Okay, it's Olga.
Boldarieva.
Right, really good.
Hey! And our next speaker is Michael Lantz, who's going to be on deck. So we'll pop this over to you.
Ready?
Yep. So hi everyone, my name is Olga and I'm from Michigan State University. I'm finishing my PhD in economics, go green. And I'm an economist, but I'm also interested in data science. So I would like to show you that economists also do some cool research, and maybe you will get interested. So the topic of my presentation, hot or not, how facial attractiveness affects wages. So let's start. You guys maybe don't know, but we economists know that your wage is actually affected by your height, your weight, and your attractiveness. And when we talk about attractiveness, it's usually measured on a 5-point scale, like from 1 to 5, like 1 being not attractive at all and 5 being extremely attractive. And in the United States, it's been estimated that the beauty premium is about 10-15%. It means that more attractive workers are actually having 10-15% higher wages than less attractive ones. It doesn't seem fair, but this beauty premium actually exists. And if you ask like why it exists, there are several explanations for this beauty premium. So one is employer discriminations. It may be the case that just employers like to hire more attractive workers. Another one may be consumer discrimination. It's also possible that customers they prefer to deal with more attractive employees. And another explanation is occupational crowding. So this idea is like more attractive people, they may sort themselves into occupation with higher wages, and they will result in higher wages compared with workers that are less attractive. Well, research showed that that number one reason for beauty premium to exist, it's actually employer discrimination. Employers do like to hire more attractive workers, and that's number one reason. Well, but the question is, why employers discriminate? Like, why are they doing this? We can't say for sure, but some lab experiments suggest that more attractive workers, they are more confident and they have better oral skills. So that may be the reason why they negotiate better and they expect having higher wages. Another reason, it's also employers wrongly consider more attractive workers as more able. So they think that they are paying these people more just because they're more able, but the reason is like they're just more attractive. I'm using data from Russia because there are many attractive, especially female workers in Russia, and I scrape my data from internet. I'm I'm Russian, so I can say that. I'm using Russian online job board, Headhunter. It's the biggest online job board in Russia. There are a lot of resumes and job ads available on this website. So I scrape the following information. I collect desired job titles and wages. So it's kind of similar structure like LinkedIn. But when you're searching for a job, you specify like what job title you're searching for and what wage you would like to receive. And also some people put profile photos. So I'm using both of it. And my research question is whether more attractive workers asking for high wages in their resume compared with just the same workers that are less attractive or with the average market wage. This is just to show you how my data look like. So this is typical profile available. You see there is a picture of a person, there is information about the person, there is a job title, and the monthly wage that he would like to receive. So I know a lot about these people, so that's why I can compare. I can basically find two workers that exactly the same, they have all the same experience, the same education. The only thing that's different, it's like how attractive they are. So this goes information. And I also have this job ads. So in the job ads, I see the description of a job and also the wage that they would like to pay for this job. So far this research is like all about economics, and you may ask yourself like, why she's like, it's data science meetup, like it's all about economics. Well, I would like to introduce some data science to this research because I would like to use machine learning to predict attractiveness. It's like I have a huge data set and there is no way I can manually rate all these pictures even if I wanted. So that's why I would like to train a model that will predict attractiveness for every picture for me. This is my picture, so to give you an idea how I'm doing this. So first I'm detecting faces. So these people, they put their photos and I need to detect faces. If I see more than one face, I don't consider these pictures because there is no way I can guess who is the job seeker at this picture. So, but if there is one person, I have 68 facial landmarks. So facial landmarks is some crucial points on your face. It's like a quarter of your eye, it's like tip of the nose. So it's the points that actually tell me like how structured your face is. It's not the best way how I can do that, but this is just a way to start. Like I'm starting my research, so if you guys have any other suggestion, you're very welcome to share. I have these 68 facial landmarks, but landmarks is just the points, right? They have coordinates, but I can just use these landmarks in my model. So what I do, I take pairwise distances. So this is all the ratios. So it gives me some idea about how, what the ratio in your face, like what is the distance between eyes, like how big is your nose, and like stuff like that. And I have a lot of features out there, and I can use them all. So I'm using principal component analysis to reduce the dimensionality of my feature space. And what was the result? Well, I just started, so I trained my model, and I got accuracy of 60%. It's not what I was hoping for, and it's definitely not what I want to have in my final paper, but I think it's a nice try, like for the beginning. It's better than random guess, which is only 20%. And the most important part is like, but whether actually more attractive people are having higher wages. Well, in Russia, I found that more attractive female workers asking for 15 and 20% higher wages than less attractive ones. This is compared to the market wages. So far, I found no evidence of the existence of beauty premium for men. I don't know, maybe I will find it later or not. So there is something going on about men, like they really don't care like how attractive they are when they hire. but it's definitely for a female worker in Russia, it's better to be attractive. So yeah, this is what I found. Because this is just a start, how I'd like to proceed with my research. So I would like to collect more labels and use crowdsourcing for that. So I consider using Amazon Mechanical Turk so that I have a lot of pictures that rated so that my model hopefully may give me better accuracy. And I also consider using convolutional neural nets. And again, like I need a lot of like pictures like that already rated to use this kind of method. And if you have any suggestion, any job offers, I'm on the job market, you're very welcome. This is my email, and we can chat after this presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, one question.
Yep.
Yes, Chuck.
Where did the attractiveness ratings come from?
Yeah, so far I used data set, like academic data sets. It's like they give you all like they give you this rating, and also rated myself. Yeah, but this is just for the beginning. Like I don't trust myself. I don't feel like I'm objective, but that's why I need this crowdsourcing to average. So ideally, I would like every picture to be rated by at least like 4 people, 2 men and 2 women.
This is Michael Lance talking about school data analysis automation.
Okay. So I'd like to preface this by saying that working at a school district for which I've done for about 10 years now, and 5 of which before I was a teacher at the middle school level, I can tell you that in the average school district, unless you're at the county level or ISD level, there's not a lot of data science going on, which probably is not very surprising to you. So with that, I just want to say that when I say that we don't have a SQL server or anything like that, even we just have a directory of CSVs, that's all we have, really. Given that background, I'll continue. So I was a teacher once upon a time, and then I got promoted to doing data analysis on student test scores where I worked. And I quickly realized that my job would involve a lot of reporting, external reporting for state accountability, for example, annual educational reports, also internal reporting, for example, grouping students or helping to make instructional decisions, and even rostering students for computerized testing. And so they presented some challenges, one being time, the time that it took, because it was just me, and it's still just me, by the way. The repetition, right, and dissemination. So, especially because I started with Excel, which I'll get into shortly. With data, the main challenges seem to be acquiring, and this is kind of universal at the school district level, I think, if I can say that, acquiring the data, standardizing it into one table from different assessment sources, visualizing, sharing the data, and then using it, what to do with it. So when I first started, I was using Excel. I thought it was the best thing ever. And I had all these formulas, and people would call me all the time, and say, hey, can you do the index match for me? Because I don't know. 10 years later, I still get phone calls to do the index match because people don't look at my tutorials, but that's another issue altogether. And then I got into BI software. I thought that was amazing. And, it still is helpful to some degree. However, there's training for myself and for the users, quote unquote, the administrators and teachers. And then you have to pay for the accounts and the licenses. And many of you probably understand how that works. So in education, there's not a ton of funding for things like that, as you probably know. And so my introduction to Python was really out of laziness because, let's say, so there's a test that students take in the fall and spring. And let's say you're a 3rd grade student, you took a math test in the fall, and you actually took it 3 times. The first time you vomited on the keyboard. The second time, you're just really tired. And the 3rd time, that was, the good. But when I look at the data, I don't know which is which, right? So I have to have the criteria on which I choose one of those scores. So it would take me days in Excel. Or I'd do an array formula, and it would crash my computer, basically. And so I discovered Pandas, and I think it took, when I was done, 2 weeks it took me to write it. I did a lot of this, right? And then after a while, I think the script now takes 7 seconds, and I still use it to this day. So that to me is I was sold right after that. So, and I want to I try to convey to other educators how this is, but, index match is the pinnacle of data usage for the nearest 5 square miles, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so I I got really into these different packages, Pandas, Seaborn, Matplotlib. I became a visualization analyst for a year and a half at Trinity Health in healthcare, because I really got into visualization. I got a little bit obsessed. Yes, this is my license plate, unless if you want a picture next to it later, let me know. And so it's probably the only one in Michigan. And so anyways, well, it is. So the question, how has Python helped in my situation, given everything I just explained? Well, for acquiring data, obviously there's an API you can connect, but I don't want to get blacklisted from the state of Michigan for the Department of Education website. I probably shouldn't be talking about this right now. Anyway, the point is there's some issues. So I'm not quite there yet. But I don't really download data frequently enough for it to bother me that much, so I haven't really pursued it, but maybe someday. Standardizing data. So this is probably really basic to most of you, but this is like rocket science in most school districts, because when you have the data like this, you can do, it's hard to really express how much time this saves and how much more you can do with it. So they have various assessments, student level data, all combined into one. They'll have scale scores. Sometimes they have percentiles. Sometimes they have error scores from different windows. So that's kind of the scaffolding, right? And that sets me up for the next step, which would be visualizing. So I start with a prototype. I'll iterate over schools, grades, and subgroups. I'll adjust for variations. So for example, if you have a school is in Matplotlib, you're making a horizontal bar chart, and you've got a school that's K through 12 and another that's K through 8. So if you have K through 8 bars, there's less than K through 12, but if you have a text or a title that's dependent on the Y coordinate, then it's going to adjust it. You don't want it to adjust it. You want it to be, so you have to put some parameters. So things like that I have to do. I guess it's pretty universal. And then saving it to PNG and CSV file. Now, some people would say that, we'd like to interact with it. And my response would be, we had that set up before, but nobody logged in because they didn't want another account. So the solution was to push this out to shared folders. And yes, you can't interact with it, but there's a CSV file that goes exactly with it, and maybe Bokeh when I'm ready for it. So here's an example. In honor of John Hunter, I wish they would make a John Hunter Elementary School, but I love Matplotlib. So if we look at the section A of grade 5 of math from the NWEA map test, fall 17, the first thing that I would do in the process would be to make a graph like this, for example. And this would be helpful because if I'm a 5th grade teacher for section A and I'm looking at my math students, or my students for math scores, it might be interested that there's a multimodal distribution here because for differentiation, right, and pacing, prioritizing, and the curriculum, I want to know where the split is to help those students. And then I might clean it up a bit, and this is actually M-step math scores looking at not proficient, partially proficient, proficient, and advanced. So this is helpful because you might see clusters of students and you might want to work with them differently and just kind of know if you're on the bubble, do you need to shift them and so on. So once you have this, then the next thing I do is I panel it. So for example, by section and by subject, so I'm going to use a facet grid from Seaborn. I'm going to map it to the distribution plot, clean it up a bit, lose the spines, lose the X-tick labels. And this is so I end up with something like this, for example, and this would be, we have section A, section B, math, reading, and so the 5th grade team meets and they say, okay, definitely for section A math and section B reading, we need to differentiate a bit and prioritize and pace our instruction a little bit differently for the different groups. And then I'll iterate. So for a school grade, a test, and this takes a while, right? Sometimes it takes an hour. So it's time for a snack or perhaps a map function to make this work out better. So when that's all said and done, and in fact, just before I left work today, I ran about, I think, another 250 charts as I iterated through all these different permutations. And, as I was thinking about it, because it really makes it so the next time around, there's no heavy lifting, right? I just run the code and it's there. So now you can ask higher order questions, right? And you can ask more interesting questions and you can make more informed decisions. And so, and then the data digs and the sense-making meetings with the school teams become more informed because they're not preoccupied with trying to get data and work with Excel. And so you can allocate your resources better and ask the more interesting questions. So again, faster turnaround time due to automation. focus on more interesting things, perhaps feature extraction or prediction to help target intervention with students. And so that's how Python has really, and Pandas and Matplotlib, Seaborn, and so on, has really helped in our school district with asking higher order questions and saving time. Thank you.
Have you heard about the research when they did this test and they were able to prove that the teacher they were cheating? So they helped, like, they erased question for correct ones, but it was all like back together. So
yes.
Yeah.
So
are you doing something like this also to check like this? True.
I don't. And obviously, whenever there's an incentive, especially teacher evaluation, you hope there's not going to be something bad that happens. But as an economist, you know how incentives work, right? So we haven't done anything that sophisticated. Our data sets, I don't think, are too big to really compare. But even if they were, it's a good idea. It's of interest, but I haven't done anything. I need to, though. Thanks for mentioning that.
So next up we have Brian Lester, and his talk title is Getting Rid of UNK, or Unknowns.
I say unk.
Unk. Bob's your unk.
Okay, so I'm Brian Lester. I'm a machine learning engineer at Trove, and mostly we do stuff with email. So I do a lot of NLP, mostly as it applies to email. And so I'm going to talk about kind of what our work on like robust models and slightly more intelligent input representations, and kind of the assumptions that currently go into input and UNC. So what is UNC? UNC's a token to handle uncommon words. So especially in deep learning, you have a lot of parameters that you have to fit. So when you only have a word a couple of times, you can't learn a real good representation. So you take UNC and you use that. And so now all these uncommon words kind of have the same representation. So you know a little bit, but you don't know that much. And you can see it really removes a lot of information. So these are excerpts from PinTreeBank and Wikitext2, which are common language modeling data sets. And you can see even in like one sentence, there's like 5 UNCs. So obviously you're losing like a lot of information. And unfortunately, you're always going to lose this information. So these are some statistical facts about language. The first one's called Zipf's law, which is essentially for any common word, it's way more common than the next most common word. So really what this means is you have a very long tail in vocabulary. So there's a lot of very uncommon words. And then on the bottom, you see Heap's law, which is essentially as you add more documents to your data set, you're always going to find more words. And so basically the practical meaning is you can't truly model language with a closed vocabulary, with UNC. There are ways, as I said before, about how to keep information. You can do your UNC before you train it, and so then you learn this kind of fuzzy meaning for any unknown word, or you could average uncommon words together when you have pre-trained vectors, which is that same idea where all these uncommon words are probably kind of similar, so you put them together, but you're still losing a lot. So a smarter way is to use an open vocabulary. And the most natural way then is to use characters, which have a closed vocabulary. But the only real problem with characters is that there's really 2 ways to combine it. There's things you have to memorize, like here, when you take dad and subtract the D and add the B, you get bad. But there's no relation to that. There aren't other words where subtracting the D and adding the B turns it from, a father figure to something bad. So you really have to memorize some of that kind of stuff about characters. But there are things that generalize. So this is generally what you call morphology in linguistics. So car plus S is cars, cat plus S is cats. The transformation is the same when you do the same text transformation. And now in email and more like social media text, you have other forms of morphology, which is I love it versus I love it, where, all those O's, it really, it basically does add meanings. And so a natural model that we're using on this kind of research development stuff is an LSTM on characters, because it's very flexible. It can learn a lot, but it can also learn the generalizations that we want. But this isn't a character LSTM, which you may have heard of, where you take an LSTM and run it over all the characters in your sequence and try to generate characters. because that has its own problems, because the average word in English is about 5, so if you're trying to model a sequence that has a dependency of like 30 words, suddenly your dependency is like 180 if you include spaces. So our idea is you can use an LSTM on single words only, and then feed that into whatever your downstream language model, whatever. So this tiny little LSTM, which you reuse on every word, it's going to learn, basically, it'll create the embedding for the word, as instead of looking it up in an embedding matrix that you've pre-trained or trained in the task, which is the common, the way most people do it right now. And so here you can really see the difference where instead of embedding the whole word into making a matrix, you embed the characters and then you combine them together. But one unfortunate thing is that you do lose kind of a lot. There's a lot of information in word embeddings, which you might have heard of with Word2Vec, where you train these word embeddings on huge corpuses and you get information out of it. You get things like, in this example, kitty minus cat plus dog is puppy. And you also do see some of the morphology stuff I talked about earlier. And the reason this happens is because you have so much data and you see all these words in so much context. But with these word vectors, they are trained separately. So even though like the distance between things that are like single and they're plural, even though that's pretty similar and you get to do these analogies, the model doesn't actually know. It doesn't understand that that's morphology or something it can generalize. It just happens because it's seen things in context so many times. Whereas with our LSTM, we were trying to actually model those kind of changes in morphology. But even though you lose this kind of stuff, the classical ones you see in Word2Vec, you actually still can see it with this kind of model. So this is from a paper from CMU, which is where we got this idea from. You can see the first two are words that were in the training set, and they're embedded with the LSTM. And then it looks up basically all the words that have the closest embeddings to this. So you can see like increased, improved, expected. It's really that ED kind of here. This paper was trained on Wikipedia, and so you see these names are actually all kings of England, which I'm sure is part of the data. And then interestingly, these last two are actually words that are not in the training set. So these are words that the embedding is created with the LSTM, and you see a lot of these words that are similar do make sense. We get the ing in the last column, and in the third column we see Noahshire's clearly going to be similar to like a city name, and we can see all the rest are actually city names that were in the training set. So you still do get these kind of word embeddings. But if you really like word embeddings, or you really want to leverage that huge amount of data that these word embeddings are trained on, they're normally on Common Crawl, Google News, that kind of stuff. You could do something like having this kind of back off, where here, if our word appears less than 5 times, we do our LSTM to look at it. Otherwise, we take our word embedding. So this is kind of like a compromise that lets us leverage like that big data. And then this was just like some quick experiments I did with it without too much tuning. You can see kind of the differences where the first one's just doing the normal word embeddings, which is what everyone does. The second one's this LSTM compositional model. And the third one is the back-off model I just showed. These were just my quick experiments, not state-of-the-art or anything, but you can see the compositional model actually outperforms the word one, and it has way less parameters, which is always nice. And so kind of future research with this, or what we're planning to do, is hopefully we can use this to build more robust models, especially for things like named identity recognition, where you're going to run into unknown words a lot. Applying the same kind of thing to your output, because right now at the end you still have a fixed output if you're doing language modeling, so that's a little unfortunate. We can also leverage this to do pre-training to get kind of those same like really good word embeddings. Then there's other options for subwords instead of just characters, like since we're trying to capture morphology, if we use a linguistic informed subwords like prefixes and suffixes, that might help. And of course there's smarter ways to combine the characters at the end with attention or something similar. So that's my talk.
Any questions? In the back?
How do you work with different encodings, or when you scrape data from different sources, it might be Latin 1 or UTF-8 or UTF-16?
repeat the question?
So he asked, how do you work with different encodings, as in actually UTF-8, Latin 1, all that kind of stuff. So our company runs like an email app, which is where a lot of the data comes from, where we kind of do it blind. We don't actually look at it, but that's all handled by the actual app team, and they all save it to UTF-8, and then I just get to work with that.
Good answer. Bob's talk title is The Imposter Syndrome, Finishing the Ironman in Last Place.
I get no reveals tonight, do I? Okay, so that's right. So what is an Ironman? Well, I'm not talking about that Ironman. I'm talking about this one, which I've done several times so far. It's a 2.4-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike and a 26.2-mile run. I can see you all looking down at my stomach. That's fine. That's the natural thing to do. So I am always the biggest guy out there when racing. And this is a look at what the swim start looks like. And in the lower corner here, you can see that a 2.4-mile swim is essentially going from swimming from Gallup Park up to to Island Park. So it's a long way, and it's a mass start. This here, all of these little dots that are hard to see, that's actually swimmers. And up here, this is a different swim start where they started on the beach, and I'm one of those hats you can see. And this is what we call it. It's Australian rules football in a washing machine, because you can swim the shortest line where everybody's swimming if you want to fight about it, or you can swim a longer distance off to the side. So we do that too. You come out of the water, you find your bike. Sometimes people hang balloons and things like that, trying to figure out where their bike is. I was never had a big problem because all the bikes are gone by the time I get there. Like, oh, there's mine right there. How hard is that? 112 miles on the bike takes about 7 hours. You can see it pretty much the width of Michigan, a little bit less. And then a little walk in the park, 26.2 miles, from basically somewhere around Brighton to somewhere around the airport. And this is all in one day. And there we go. This was, which one was that? Panama City Beach. That would be Florida. This is my first one. 13:45 was my finish time. And does that make me an Ironman? So what is an Ironman is the question. The race is what I just told you about. An Ironman is, am I an Ironman? Well, yeah, I am. But I don't know it, even today. So why wouldn't I be? Well, I would be back here somewhere. These guys, they all swim by me. They literally lap me. The fastest swimmers come right by. Going up a hill when you're the heaviest guy out there feels unfair. I think everybody should have to carry the same amount of weight as I do. Nobody agrees with that. It's hard to get that. So everybody's faster than me on the bike. And you can tell by the look on my face there, it's not as easy as it seems. So long, painful run, blisters, and just not feeling good. And again, everybody is faster than me. Also, the first time I did Wisconsin, I didn't finish. There's my DNF, disqualified, did not finish. That's a bummer. My bike broke. The bottom bracket on the bike broke, and the whole pedal assembly would wobble. So if I got in the top chain ring, that it would throw the chain off. So like every 10th revolution, the chain would come off. So finally I realized if I stayed in the small gears, then I could go. But I'm in my, it's like, okay, 110 miles to go, like great. So I made it to the finish, but I had missed the time cutoff. And so they didn't let me do the run, which at that point, it was 60 degrees and raining. And I didn't really care at that point. I mean, I did care. It hurt my feelings. It really did. So why wouldn't I be an Ironman? Well, maybe I failed once. These are the medals that I got from doing all the different Ironman triathlons I've done. So, yeah, probably an Ironman, I'd say. So what I'm really here to talk about is the imposter syndrome. So I'm a senior developer here at TD Ameritrade, and sometimes I feel like it. And sometimes I spend all day on a bug. And I think, you know what? Somebody's going to come over and say, you're not a senior developer. You spent all day on this stupid bug. Okay? I like this one because, do you remember the name of the guy that Mr. Incredible fought in the end? It was Syndrom. See what I did there? Okay. So the imposter syndrome is something that's real. It's in very technical professions, it's more pronounced because you can't know everything anymore. There's no way. So, we look up stuff on Stack Overflow every day, every hour. There's a lot I don't know because you just can't. What you're going to work on tomorrow, you might not have ever seen it before. I struggle to solve bugs. I spend hours, sometimes days, on a bug, and you told your boss, "Hey, I've almost got that done. I'm sure I'll be done tomorrow." You're not going to be done tomorrow. So maybe you are. You get lucky sometimes, or sometimes the bug is really easy, and then you feel bad about yourself. You're like, you know what? I used the wrong object, and that was just a stupid mistake. It happens. I sit next to Sean Law. I sit next to Dr. Sean Law, and he never makes mistakes. We know this, right? But eventually I solved the bugs. And that's why I put the Ironman logo there, because I want to remind myself that I'm going to struggle. Everyone's going to struggle. It doesn't seem that easy. It seems easy when someone else is doing it. You talk to somebody and they're like, "Oh, I threw this thing together and I just did this and I did that." And you're like, "Wow, that's really cool." They don't tell you about how you spent time. So back to the Ironman. I was running in Wisconsin the second time that I did the race, and I ran past a cop, and my face red, just had the shuffle going on, the marathon shuffle going on, and the cop said, "Hey man, are you okay?" And I said, "Man, if I feel this bad on my second loop, I want you to shoot me. This is a true story." 13 miles later, hours later, I come shuffling by. Same cop puts his hand on his gun and says, "How you feeling?" I'm feeling better. I really am. So I had a time during the Ironman in Florida where I was down on myself. There's parts in every race. So, a race that takes up to 16 hours, 17 hours. You're going to have a bad day at some point. Like, you're going to blow a flat. You're just not going to eat enough. You're not going to drink enough. It's going to be too hot, too cold. Doesn't matter. Something's going to go wrong. And I was down. You know what? I got kids. I'm too old for this kind of thing. I'm the heaviest guy out here. The winners have already finished. The winners would finish the race before I would get to the run. Before I started the Ironman, the winner's coming in the other way. 9 hours, no problem. And he's not even sweating. He didn't even have the decency to sweat. So I was going to quit. I was done. And this little tiny girl, she might have been, 20 years old, 100 pounds tops. She came running by. She said, "Come on, we're going to be an Ironman. Let's go." I said, "We are?" She's like, "Yeah, all we got to do is run. We got like 9 more miles to go." I'm like, "We got 9 miles to go." She's like, "We've done 138 miles so far. Like, you can't quit now." I said, "Yeah, you're right." And so I started running. And I got my medal. You saw the picture. And the bottom line is that in your day-to-day, you're going to find those times where you want to quit. And your body's going to tell you. Your friends are going to tell you, just move on to something else. You'll get through it. So I don't know how much time I have. I got time? Okay. Actually, why don't I take some questions? First of all, show of hands. Anyone else? Imposters? Anyone lying about it? All right.
Any questions for Bob?
So one point that stuck out to me was that the lady at the end who ran past you and said, "Hey, we're at this, we're gonna keep going." How would you recommend, or how do you deal with in your own practice, supporting others that you see are struggling with that as well?
I tell that story, really? No, I honestly do. Yeah, I think we need to support each other all the time. You can tell when someone's really getting their butt kicked. You know, you make a joke to someone who's normally laughing, and they're just like, "Not now." Like, hey, you know what's going on? We got these ping pong tables back here. We got foosball. Sometimes you just walk away, and sometimes you go home, go to bed, get a good night's sleep. You come in tomorrow morning, you're like, oh, this isn't hard. You've been banging your head on the desk for hours, and so a lot of times, just walk away for a few minutes and go find something to laugh about. Go on YouTube, find a joke, and yeah, I would give that advice every time. Tell people that you're going to get through it. You deserve to be here. You got hired. I assume that everyone's getting better every day, right? You're learning stuff. So when they hired you, they said you're good enough to do this job, and you've been learning every day since then. So yeah, you may be struggling today, but tomorrow you'll get through it. So yeah. Anyone else? Do you have time?
In water, if you totally relax, do you sink or float?
In a wetsuit, you could sit on my back and I wouldn't sink. So in triathlon, we wear a wetsuit because it's much faster through the water, but also it's much safer. But they have had some tragedies. But they have scuba divers around the corners. Like when you go around there's a big 6 foot tall balloon, like a pyramid shaped balloon. Yeah, and everyone kind of, even if you're swimming way over there, they come in, so they'll put divers down there. There's kayaks all over the place. It should never have a tragedy, but it does occasionally. But yeah, it's only a tragedy if you panic, because you can literally just stop moving and you'll float like a cork. So yeah.
Let's thank Bob again, and we're going to have. Thanks, everyone. This is Tawfiq Ammari, and the title of this talk is Machine Learning for Exploratory Research in Information Science.
Cool. Hi, so I'm Tawfiq. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan. School of Information. I study parenting online, and there's only like a few of us worldwide, so that's awesome. I'm going to present the contents of a paper that we submitted recently to the CHI, the biggest basically computer-human interaction conference, and it studies how parents are using pseudonymous social media sites, specifically Reddit, which is awesome. You got to check Reddit if you're banging your head against a problem. Spend 10 minutes there. All right. So just a quick go into the theory here. So basically, pseudonymous sites allow people to talk about things that might be, stigmatizing. They don't want to talk about them when they're using their real names. And there were a couple of papers that looked at anonymous websites for moms, where they basically go there and just talk about everything they don't want to talk about when they're using their real IDs. Same deal happens with dads, and that's one of the papers that I had published. And it was like they used pseudonymous social media sites, especially when they're recently divorced, when they're single dads, or if they're gay. Like LGBTQ parents in general do like to use pseudonymous media sites, particularly if they're living in places that are not very welcoming, sometimes rural areas, etc. Okay, so we want to ask two main research questions. What topics do parents discuss on pseudonymous social media sites online? And are there any differences between mom-centered and dad-centered online social media use? Okay, so this is just a quick look at the rise in the use of parenting subreddits. Basically parenting, that's the big one. And then there's Daddit for dads and Momit for moms. Okay, and so this is the banner for each one of them. This is parenting, this is Momit, and this one here is Daddit. Okay. And so what we tried to do was basically, and by the way, people do cross-post. So we'll find people who post to Daddit and parenting, and then Daddit and Momit. But this is proportional, so mostly between the cross-posting is between Momit and parenting, Daddit and parenting, but sometimes it's also crosses between them. What we did was an aggregate LDA model for all of them. But since parenting is the biggest, we wanted to also flesh out the differences that come out of Momit and Daddit. So we did an independent LDA model for Momit, an independent one for Daddit. But we also thought that sometimes maybe we might get similar topics from Momit and Daddit. And so to compare them, we also ran independent Word2Vec models on both of these subreddits. And we basically took the topic models and created topic similarities using Jacquard similarities. So basically, we made the Jacquard similarity between the topic. So if this is an example topic: mom, dad, parent, and the comment. Moms and dads try to do the best for their children. The score would be the Jacquard similarity between them both. In this case, 1/4. All right. So let's go and see how our research questions panned out. So the first one is about what the topics were the parents were discussing on pseudonymous social media sites like Reddit. And how are they discussed in the 3 different subreddits that I showed you: Mom, Dad, and Parenting. So these are the main topics: birth, milestones, transition to teen years, discipline or abuse, that's a common question, judgment, playing competition, purchase suggestions, faith and family, and online interactions in general. So it turns out, by the way, that I'm not a parent. How many here are parents in the room? All right. I don't know how you guys do it. It looks like it's a really difficult thing to do. Everyone is asking questions, and it appears as though no one knows exactly what they're doing. But it's so one of the things that we found, for example, we can do is measure where some of the topics are more dense. So, for example, sleep training happens to be denser with Momit, the mom subreddit, and Dadit, but less so in parenting, as you can see. Same deal with breastfeeding. Kind of makes sense. Now, for example, with milestones, we start to see something interesting here. Milestones themselves. So this is about when should my son start talking or walking, etc. That's again, Momit and Dadit have more of a concentration here. But once you start talking about teen talk and discipline, the discussion starts moving to parenting. That's the major subreddit, the major parenting subreddit. And one of the things we've noticed there is that the breakdown here is not based on gender. It's based on how you think of parenting. Like, what's your parenting philosophy as a parent? Are you a disciplinarian? Do you want them to take it on their own pace? That's the breakup there. So it kind of moves into the parenting subreddit. This one is kind of interesting because one of the things we found constantly with fathers online is that they want to provide support for each other. And so if we look at how one of the things that happens is that there's a congratulatory post. Welcome to Dadit. Welcome to Momit. And if you look here, Dadit is basically the densest one. They have lots of things where it's hey, welcome, congratulations on having your first kid. Now we wanted to discuss again, how do they break down when we go to Dadit and Momit specifically? What are the differences there? And so, again, we did the different LDA models, independent LDA models, and also the Word2Vec. And here are the father-centric ones. NICU experiences, particularly because mom is usually still in the hospital as well. Legal custody questions and experiences. Language here gets really colorful. And Halloween, which is kind of weird, but yeah. All right, mother-centric, it's about the child weight gain, and especially in the first few months, recovering from birth and losing pregnancy weight, and finally maintaining the home with a young child. Now, I said there were common topics that would come up from the two independent LDA model, and these are 4 of them: food preparation, circumcision, vaccines, and naming the child. So child names. For food preparation, one of the interesting things that dads focus more on snacks, just they're preparing food at a later age. Moms talk a lot about pureed foods, solids, vegetables, when you start introducing solid foods and that kind of stuff. With circumcision, as might be expected, dads are focused on just their sons, right? Circumcision. Moms, on the other hand, are focused on female genital mutilation. They talk about societal factors. So it's a bit different. With vaccines, we found something that's kind of weird. And that moms, for example, focus a lot on diseases, statistics, MMR, vaccine, pertussis, etc. With dads, the first one that comes up, the closest words to the word vaccine is HPV. And so there's a lot of talk about HPV vaccine, STDs, that sort of thing. And that comes out of the Word2Vec model. Finally, naming. Naming is kind of interesting. So both of them talk about nicknames, pronunciations, and then there's the link with a cultural aspect. Irish for some reason with Dadit, Chinese for some reason with Momit, we're not sure. But the interesting one with Dadit was stripper. And so that threw me in for the loop. I didn't know what that meant. And I thought the model was just wrong. But then we found that there were few threads on Dadit, specifically opening question as to whether or not that name is a stripper name. And turns out that there were lots of rules, and whether or not the name ended with an I or a Y made all the difference. And so that's an interesting thing that I didn't think about before. Now, I show all this because now we did submit this paper, and I'm not sure it's still under review. But one of the things that we faced, one of the problems we faced is that once you run the LDA topic, it's very difficult to actually say what the ground truth is, because we don't have one. That's why we're running the LDA. That's when we were doing this study in the first place. So how do we kind of provide for any reader some sort of way to actually trust our topic modeling? One of the things we did was we basically randomly went through as many of the topics as we could to just see that it made sense to us. But there's a very difficult way to actually do it objectively, using objective metrics. One metric that you can use with LDA is perplexity, but there is a paper out there that says it doesn't work. Perplexity levels could be really good, but then it doesn't really make sense to you, the reader. So one of the things we're thinking about later is running it through mTurk and seeing if we can get an average that makes sense, that people say, yeah, that topic makes sense to me. But if anyone has run similar techniques, it would be great to talk after this. Same deal with Word2Vec. So we found that Word2Vec could be used to find differences between if the same topics are coming up in two different places online. But I also want to know if there are other ways to use Word2Vec in exploratory research. That's it.
One quick question. Anybody?
Yeah.
Is there, I know this is very obvious, but is there a really big difference in male and female users of Reddit?
Reddit in general, yes. But part of the problem is that we don't know what the makeup of these subreddits are. In Reddit in general, I think it's roughly 60 to 40 male. And that's a study by Pew. So, yes.
Great, thank you. So, next up is Clayton Yochum. And his title of his talk is Ditching R for Python and Algorithmic Trading. And Clayton is also organizes the R Meetup in town. Make sure you go check out his meetup.
So my name's Clayton Yochum, and like Sean said, I'm going to be talking about ditching R for Python and algorithmic trading. If you know me, you know that I'm a huge R nerd, and so ditching is certainly too strong of a term. I don't think I could ever fully ditch R, even for one project. But I think anything a little more truthful or realistic would have made a much more boring title. So who am I? I'm a data science engineer at Methods Consultants, which is a small consulting firm in Ypsilanti, Michigan, so not too far from here. Like Sean said, I co-organize the Ann Arbor R user group. And so if, like me, you love R, or if you don't love R and you are just curious about it, please come to our meetup. We've got one on Thursday at Spark, just downtown, like 2 blocks from here.
Kitty corner.
Kitty, like a half a block from here, that's right. I co-maintain now this like RDrop 2 package for using Dropbox from R, so this is just to kind of give you a sense, like I'm really kind of in this R world, diehard R fan, I'm really not a Python user. At a previous job, like 4 years ago, especially because I think the tools for doing this in R were much harder, I need to do some web scraping, and so used Python and Beautiful Soup, like, I don't know, 2 or 3. I think someone told me today they're up to Beautiful Soup 4, so I'm sure it's like even easier in Python than it used to be. But I am by no means a Python user, especially when you think about kind of the data science or the scientific computing stack. The pandas and the SciPy and the NumPy, like that's really not my bag, but you'll see that I end up using it anyways. So in my work at this consulting firm, one of my big clients is a hedge fund, or I guess he's like a former hedge fund manager, but now is like maybe going to be a future hedge fund manager. I don't know exactly what to call him, but he's this finance guy, and he's got this large pile of very painstakingly curated data that is very, very proprietary, very, very valuable. I'm not going to really get to show you any of the details here, but the idea is that he's got all this data, and he's like, for this sub-segment of the market, I think these are the important indicators that are going to help me make money determining, when to buy and when to sell people in this market, stocks in this market segment. But especially, I think we're well over 200 different features, and that's before you consider feature engineering and doing things like leading and lagging, all the different things you can do to kind of manipulate your data to allow you to build better models. Without some sort of statistical or machine learning kind of approach, it's difficult, if not impossible, to really build a good, robust model, given all of these things that you think have, kind of different levels of value to them. And so that's why he's come to us to turn this kind of pile of data that he knows to have some value or thinks to have some value, and it turns out it's insanely valuable. But he wants us to help him turn that into a trading strategy. And the hard part the easy part can be building a trading strategy. The hard part is telling if that strategy is actually any good, because it's very easy. And I think that I would probably say 99.9% of oh, look, I'm using some software engineering or some machine learning to make money in the stock market. Most of those, almost all of those strategies are not going to work very long. Don't do things like accounting for commissions or slippage or accounting for selection biases and data leakage when you're trying to do a back test to see if a strategy is any good. And so that ends up really being the hardest part of my work in this project is okay, we came up with a strategy, it seems to work, but how confident are we that it's actually going to work, that it's going to continue working, that it would have worked in the past, had we come up with it previously? And like I said, I can't really show you much detail, and my slides here are actually very boring. It's not because I wrote them in R, although I did write them in R. It's because I was putting out fires all day at work and didn't have much time to prepare the slides. But the process, just at a very high level, we have this raw data that this guy has provided, or his team has provided, generate some sort of clean features from that, feed that into one or more models to make predictions, and these could be simple linear models, these could be deep neural nets, anywhere, anything in between. I'm a big fan of tree-based models, so I end up doing random forests and GBMs anywhere that kind of makes sense because they are always impressively performant. We take these predictions and then we make picks. And so there are different constraints on what we want our set of picks to look like, but we might say we want a certain number of longs, which means we are going to buy them, assuming that or hoping that the value is going to go up over some period of time. We might have a certain number of shorts we want, so we say, which is just the opposite of a long, meaning that it's a stock that you think is going to go down in value, and so you can do things to make money from that. But then once we just have a set of picks where it's okay, I'm gonna go long on these 10 and short on these 10, there's also an additional step where you calculate what sizes of positions you actually want to take those longs and shorts in. And once you've done all of those steps for any number of days for a strategy you might be considering implementing, then you have to evaluate that, and you do some kind of day-by-day evaluation, but you're also evaluating this thing over a long period of time. And so I've been working on this project for, I think, about a year and a half, basically the entire time that I've been at Methods. And I wrote a ton of custom R code because that's my tool. That's what I know. That's what I was already building these models in. And I ended up starting to build quite a large back-testing framework so that I can say, plug these models in, plug these additional functions for turning predictions to picks to actual positions taken each day, and do some kind of do that over time and generate some different metrics about how that strategy would have done. It's just an unbelievable amount of code that I wrote, just custom R code, and it's just me writing it for the most part. There's a couple other people to put some eyes on it, but it's really there's hardly any tests, which is on me. I could have tested it better as I was building it. But there's also limited functionality because I'm building this very kind of bespoke backtesting platform around exactly the way that I have defined the problem, which isn't necessarily the right way or the best way to define the problem. It's something that I'm kind of continually learning and redefining the problem as I've gone through this, because I do not have a finance background. I have an undergrad degree in math and a little minor in econ, but that doesn't prepare you for any of this kind of stuff. So it's been a lot of learning over the last year and a half as to how this needs to work. But PyData Meetup here in July this guy, Gus Gordon from Quantopian. Hopefully some of you guys, well, actually, show of hands. Was anybody here for Gus Gordon's talk in July? Yeah. So I thought it was a really good talk, and particularly I was very impressed by the tools that he was talking about. And so Quantopian is this very interesting quantitative or this like trading platform where you can build your own algorithms, put them on Quantopian's like platform, and if it does well, like they'll give you money to use it with their money, like to put their capital behind it and give you a cut. But what was really interesting to me was all of the open source tools that are literally just on GitHub that they use to run Quantopian in the background. And so there's 3 of them that he talked about, AlphaLens, Zipline, and Pyfolio. I'm going to kind of skip AlphaLens because I haven't been focusing on that one too much. But basically, Zipline helps you run a backtest, and Pyfolio helps you look at the results of a backtest to see if it was any good or not. And I was really impressed at just how the way that he was describing the way these libraries worked is like, oh, I think that's what I would have built in another 2 years after I had like failed a bunch over the next couple of years. And so I started thinking like, maybe I should use these tools that other people have built that are more, significantly more, battle tested, unit tested, and, have like real money trading on them all the time. And so they were doing a much better job solving the same kind of problems. And I started digging into that world, which again is like, kind of first forays in Python in years and years. And so I start by just kind of generating all the same backtest data using all my R code that I was, but now I'm using Pyfolio to tell me if those are any good. And so that'll generate a lot of the same metrics that I was generating, like simple things like alpha, beta, Sharpe ratio, but it also does about a half a dozen others. And if you do a full tear sheet, it's like probably 30 plus plots, which is really incredible. And I use Zipline to turn, then I started kind of going back and using Zipline to turn my predictions, which I did not spell correctly, into these evaluated results that you then pass into Pyfolio. And like I said, I haven't really used AlphaLens yet, but even now I'm still doing it half and half, and I think that's okay. There's a lot of code that's kind of not worth burning to the ground that I've built up in R over the last year, and also running the predictions along with the Zipline backtest would actually take too long. So what I end up doing is kind of generating the predictions in one set and then taking those predictions and running those through Zipline very quickly, which also allows me to kind of play with some of the smaller parameters of how the strategy works. But I get all these benefits. Like I said, battle-tested code, way more metrics and plots, a nice decoupling of building my prediction from my strategy, and there's a couple of big kind of hurdles that I had here. Python is quite different from R. Mixed code bases are not the best thing ever. Also, I don't know if anybody here is an R user or uses the tidyverse. I think Pandas is great, but I think the tidyverse is like, this is things like dplyr and the Magruder pipe, way better than Pandas. And also, I think it's ridiculous that if I take one of my NumPy vectors or columns out of Pandas and just take one object out of it, that all of a sudden it's a different type. I think that gets me every time and really annoys the hell out of me. So what's next? Another talk that was given, I think actually before the Quantopian one, was this tool called Pachyderm, which is for building kind of language-independent, containerized data workflows. And that's actually how I'm going to build out the next iteration of our platform to allow me to backtest much more easily and to backtest kind of quicker. And oh, yes, I'm the first one to hit the limit. That is awesome. Docker containers everywhere. Yes.
And so the next speaker is Alex Kale. And the original title of his talk was something about connected vehicles.
Yes.
So.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? I'm Alex. One of my jobs is working for the University of Transportation Research Institute on North Campus. Today I'll be talking about connected vehicle data. So for those of you who don't know, Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan is one of the leaders in connected vehicle and automated vehicle research. There is a deployment in the area of about 1,000 to 3,000 vehicles, depending on who you ask, with with connected vehicle data that we're collecting every single day from regular people like you and me trucks and buses around here. So this is talking about that data here. So part of my reason I want to talk about this is try to crowdsource a solution to a problem that we've been dealing with, and as far as I know, that no one has really solved yet, which is how to privatize or protect the data that we're getting from connected vehicles while making it useful to researchers. So depending on who you talk to, so connected vehicle data, in case you're not aware of it, is just basically GPS data. So you get lat longs, you get people's speeds, headings, a bunch of identifiers about the cars and stuff. So that's basically what it is. So the whole point of connected vehicle technology is you broadcast that information to other vehicles nearby so they know what you're doing, where you're heading, hopefully in the future, whether you're going to turn or not, stuff like that. So that's the data that's being useful for researchers. So some people are concerned about the privacy about connected vehicle data. So some, like my boss, are worried that, if we share that data with the public, then people will know where you live and work. And some people don't want to know that. Personally, I don't think that's a big deal because, I think that it's already public information with LinkedIn and other data sources on the web that you can find out freely. But to other people, that's also a big deal. Also, but there's other places you also go with your car that some might consider private or not private. The supermarket, some people might care it, whether you shop at Meijer or Walmart, or what schools your kids go to, other stuff. So we're trying to come up with a solution to make this data useful while still protecting people's privacy for all levels. So another similar data set that we currently have, and I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the New York City taxi data set. Is anyone familiar with that? So basically, New York City has a data set on all taxi fares in the city of New York for, a couple of years. So the data they have are the drop-off points, pickup points, what taxi it is, how much the fare was, how much the passenger tipped, and all that. So it's a little bit different. They only have the endpoints. They don't show you what route they actually took in the car. But just from this few piece of information, some hackers were able to identify, which celebrity took a certain trip just by looking up gossip magazines, finding photos. Basically, I think they didn't describe it exactly, but I think what they did was they looked up photos of celebrities and taxis in New York City. They didn't actually care what celebrity it was. But basically, they Googled it, found an image, read the corresponding article to figure out what day it was and try the location. So once they have the day, location, and approximate time, then they can go into the New York City taxi database or data set and look up and try to find that corresponding fare. And so basically they were able to find it for, Bradley Cooper here and Jessica Alba, figure out where they were going, where they ended up. And then basically they're looking at how much they tipped. That was basically the goal. It was just for fun, but they basically, found. So basically, that's sort of innovation and privacy, depending, how you view it, right? So, with that little information, they were able to figure out. But, the other thing that I wasn't sure is whether they were actually correct. There could have been 2 trips or 3 trips that could have matched that profile, and they just picked the wrong one, right? Because there's no ground truth in, this data set. They're just doing their best guess. All right, so that's part of the issue we have. So currently, there's a couple of different algorithms that that has been brought up about how to protect the privacy. So the goal is basically, I think most people agree, is you want to protect the endpoints of your trips without making the data useless. If that makes sense, right? So here, I've created 4 trips on Google Maps from 4 different destinations, and then the endpoints or the start point here is TD Ameritrade, right? So this is what, the data would look like. You have your 4 trips, you have points along the way, and then, you have the route and starting and end point. So the question is, how can we obfuscate the endpoints to hide that, our home or our workplace is TD Ameritrade? All right, so the most common method that people can think of is to use a distance-based algorithm where you obfuscate the ending based on some distance from the endpoint. So it's so I just did this by hand, but basically sort of looks like this once you apply the algorithm to these 4 trips. So basically what you get, unfortunately, is you basically will end up with a circle around the centroid, which is the destination of choice. So that's not a great algorithm in my view. So another one is, oops, I lost it. Oh, it skipped the slide. All right, so I'll just talk. So another algorithm is just to do a time base. So you lop off some random time portion from the beginning or end of the trip. And then that will make it more random jaggedness around the destination. But then there's also issues with time-based algorithms, similar to distance-based. And then another algorithm that people there it is. So this is what sort of the time-based cutoff would look like. So, you have your points a little bit. It won't be as circular as a distance-based algorithm, but it's still sort of, centroid-ish around the destination point. So the last algorithm so far is sort of like a map-based algorithm, where basically you take the endpoint and you take the route, and then you cut off the endpoint up to, say, a major intersection, like a 4-way stop or a 3-way stop, where the options to continue that trip are multitude, or high in multitude, and then high in multi-dimensions. So, there's more than a lot of options that they could have done. So it becomes less clear about where they were ending up or where they started from. But in order to that, you need to know something about the road network and road classifications and residential areas and all that. So, if you're driving into the Old West Side, you might, if you want to hide them within the Old West Side, you might want to cut them off at like Liberty and Ashley, or Liberty and First, where, that's sort of like the gateway into the Old West Side, right? So that's a relatively new algorithm, but I still don't think that's exactly perfect. So basically, my worry is that, so there's sort of 2 sorts of hacking you can do. One is that, if I know this person is in this data set, how do I identify them? And I think based on just thinking about it, that regardless of how good the algorithm is, eventually I think they'll be able to figure out who you are in that data set. If they know something about your patterns or where you live and work, they can figure out, well, what's the usual routes you can take, regardless of endpoints, right? The other questions that I think is easier to privatize is like, there's this data set, but who's in the data set? It's like, I don't know anybody in the data set. How can I identify people? That's, I think, easier to obfuscate. All right, so basically, depending on the algorithm, we're doing a good job or bad job. Last thing I want to say, so as I said, we have a current deployment. If you're interested in joining and having your card join this study, you can go here and sign up. For those who don't know, the University of Michigan is deploying an autonomous shuttle on North Campus later this month or next month. It'll be free to, or not the public, free to U of M, and you could probably just hop on. And then
let's give Alice a hand. Raghu will be talking to us about improving access using interaction and analysis via Bokeh. an engineer's story.
So just to give you a background, I'm new to Python, and most of the work I do is in C++, Fortran, or MATLAB. And my current company is Pratt & Miller, and we are into motorsports. And what we try to do is what I'm trying to do is trying to look for a tool which will make it easy for multiple people to look at and analyze. So for example, if you have a plot in MATLAB, if I send it to someone else who is at a racetrack, he needs to open MATLAB and basically interact with it. So in my case, I noticed there are a lot of beautiful visualizations which were made by Python. So I thought maybe Python will be a good place to start making interactive tool which is portable. So HTML is one of the formats which Plotly or Bokeh is developed in. I mean, the output, so that we can just, this gives us ability to basically gather data, visualize and analyze data in real time. People can zoom in, zoom out, select data, remove data points, analyze it in greater detail. So this is going to be, so the two versions I looked at one was Plotly. The issue I found was it did not have a callback option. So what we are trying to do is trying to see how changing parameters in a function influences the plot basically. So Plotly did not have the callback feature, so that was an issue. But Bokeh had a callback option, so it seemed like a good tool to look at. So I just wanted to. So this is the sliders example on Bokeh. Basically, you can choose phase, frequency. You can basically move this slider, and change the plot. This, as I don't have internet connection, I cannot show it to you. But yeah, so this is my actual implementation. So we have close to 20 parameters, and we do a lot of playing around with the data set in terms of what is the fastest speed you can gain, or what is the largest lateral force you can generate at a corner. So using this, a race engineer or someone who is playing around with the data can see the influence of maybe weight of the vehicle, what camber they are, or how the tires are aligned on the vehicle, how it influences. So the plot you're seeing is very crucial for finding out how different parameters influence vehicle handling or vehicle dynamics. So basically, my goal for this talk was just trying to explore, trying to find some help. So that's why I came over here to find out if I'm focused on the right tool, or should I be looking at another tool? So even if I have developed this application in Bokeh, it still has some limitations. I need to use Python and Anaconda in conjunction. So somebody using it in a remote location needs to install this and run this application via Python compiler. So I wanted to know if there is a way I can create a standalone application, and is that a possibility? Otherwise, I was thinking if Python or Bokeh server can be combined with Takinter or Tkinter GUI interface for Python. But I found out via forums it's not a possibility because it uses JavaScript. So I'm thinking, should I continue with Python, or if you have any suggestions or advice, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, this is my lightning talk.
Any questions? Well, with that. Last but not least, we have Vincent Rusnell, who will be telling us about Sage mathematical research, and time permitting, he'll be talking about PLEX agent coding. So.
Okay, so I'm Vincent Rusnell. I did my undergraduate degree at University of Michigan.
Microphone.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
How about that? Okay. So I did my undergraduate degree at University of Michigan, and recently I graduated from Clemson University with a master's degree, the 2017 champs of football. My area of study was number theory, and one of the things I did in number theory was I used something called Sage, which is based primarily on NumPy, SciPy, and many other applications of Python. And the nice part about it is you can code Python right in Sage. So if you do some algorithms on mathematical analysis, you can use Python to loop through quadratic extensions of number fields and whatnot in number theory. So what I was interested in was modular forms, Siegel modular forms, and L functions. So if you don't know what a modular form is, well, the Taniyama-Shimura-Vey conjecture, if you're familiar with cryptography, elliptic curves are modular forms, and elliptic curves play a crucial role in modern cryptography. So, like I said, it has applications to cryptography, my research does. And that usually goes through what's called L functions, that when you attach a modular form to an L function, you get a product expansion called a Euler product, that gives a product of prime numbers. So by understanding modular forms and L functions, we can understand prime numbers better. And when you understand prime numbers better, you can understand cryptography better, and the discrete logarithm problem becomes easier. So what we want to do is we want to consider the upper half plane, where this is a complex number field, where x plus iy, y is greater than 0, and xy is an element of the real numbers. So it's this shaded area up here. It's a subset of the complex numbers. And what we want to do is we want to extend this definition to higher dimensions. So I was particularly concerned with H2 cross H2 and H4. This is a fourth degree, and those are two degrees. And so Hn, if you were looking at 4's n, this is a matrix, a 4x4 matrix with elements in the complex numbers, where z is symmetric and y is positive definite. Those are matrices. So we consider what's called Siegel pullbacks of modular forms to particular dimensions. And this was computed before my research by Dominic Lanfear of H1 cross H1 into H2 and H1 cross H2 into H3. So what I did was I computed H2 across H2 into H4. And like I said, this gives you, we don't have many computations of Siegel modular forms yet. They're generalities of modular forms. So if we can compute more modular forms, we can understand prime numbers and many various things in number theory that would help greatly our understanding of like the Langland's problem and many other certain things. So I did this, Dominic Lanfear computed all this by hand. I used Sage and Python to write code based on an algorithm written in a Shimura paper, who was the name that I said earlier, the Taniyama-Shimura-Vey conjecture, which was famous in the proof of Fermat's last theorem back in 1996. So basically what H2 cross H2 into H4 means is these are three-dimensional vector spaces. And so you have a six-dimensional space embedded into a 10-dimensional space. So the way you can analyze this, or an analogy to this, is if you have a line in 3 dimensions, you have an x, y, z coordinate, but the line itself is a one surface. It's a one-dimensional surface. It's just back and forth. So we consider a 6-dimensional surface living in 10-dimensional space. So the puzzle pieces to compute for these pullbacks is that we need to understand special embeddings of matrices. And these matrices have really nice symmetric properties that when you transform a function or an elliptic curve, they give you nice results symmetrically on the other side of the plane or in the other part of the dimension. And so by understanding the symmetries, we can understand the functions better. So that's why we transform these functions. So another thing we need to understand is that there's these things called double coset representatives. So this is a symplectic group, and it's just basically matrix multiplication. You're left multiplying it by something called a parabolic group, and then you're right multiplying it by this embedding. And this embedding it's easier in even dimensions than it is in odd, because even has a nice structure on the diagonals when you embed them. So in this, we're just doing a left multiplication, right multiplication, and what we're doing a representative is that you might have different matrices that when you multiply them by another matrix in this group, it comes out to the same result. So what we call those two matrices that multiply each other to get the same result is we call them equivalent. Not equal, but equivalent. And so this multiplication ran through the permutations of the general structure of the matrices will create equivalence classes. And those can be represented by the double coset representative. So what happens is when you computed the H2 cross H2 coset representatives, you have 4 coset representatives. That's all you need, just 4. And they're simple matrices, really, but the algorithm was tough to compute and nobody had put it into code yet. Another thing you need to understand is something called an isotropy group. So when you're moving from 6 dimensions to 10 dimensions, you want to find out what parts of those functions are stable or invariant under the transformation. What remains the same? So that way you can map back and forth without loss of data. So another thing that you may need to consider, I didn't have to luckily, and neither did Dominic Lanfer, is a change of basis. Basically in a vector space, you have functions that make up the whole vector space. Any combination, multiplying by a constant or something like that will change the vector space. So finally, you want to we solve the pullback of the degree 4 modular form by using the puzzle pieces and some number theory. I say some number theory because it took me like 8 months, but I didn't want to really get into details about that. So what's the big data problem here? Is that for different embeddings into higher dimensions, such as H1 cross H2 and H5, or this one, the puzzle pieces are similar, not identical, but the puzzle's always different. So you have all these pieces, and you have to do a lot of manipulation by hand to figure out how do we fit these pieces together to create the puzzle or the pullback. And so there's one approach, theoretical approach, is using an advanced integral over a coset space, which uses a Rankin-Selberg convolution, which is advanced mathematics, but it has really nice properties which come out in L functions, actually. So my solution, I should say not solution, but possible solution, is to generate a lot of data. I wrote all this code to generate the cosets, the isotropy groups, the embeddings, and I wrote it for general any dimension embeddings. So I had access to the Palmetto server cluster in Clemson, and I had it for a couple months. So I computed all interesting embeddings. I say interesting because if you look at H1 cross H2, we knew what that was already. That was computed. So that would be an H3. So by knowing what we have already, H1 cross H1 and H1 cross H2 and H2 cross H2, I generated interesting embeddings. Basically, it's all these embeddings into a higher dimension, and I generated for degree 1077, all the combinations of interesting embeddings of that sort. And so I ended up with, I think, over a terabyte of data. And so what I plan on doing, the terabyte of data didn't go into my thesis. I didn't have room for it. But in the upcoming year, I hope to use Python visualization code to try and search for patterns within this data. If we can find patterns in this data, we might shed light on the Riemann hypothesis, which is a famous 160, 70, I don't know how many years now, 170, I think, year-old problem that it's the pinnacle, it's the pinnacle of mathematical research. If you can solve this, mathematicians are never on the front of New York Times, but you will be if you solve that. So I don't know how much time I have left, but really quickly, what I did over the summer after I graduated is I used the great courses, which is these distinguished professors from around the country give lectures, and it's something that you can download. So here's an example of a great course. It's number theory. There's, you can download them or you can stream them. They contain a lot of metadata. So here's the metadata. There's lecture names. There's the lecture information. And so what I did was I needed a way to organize I have a lot of great courses because I watch them in my spare time, and they're 30 minutes long, and I like to be better at Jeopardy. So I try to focus on things that like mythology and popes and all that stuff. But I needed a way to organize it, and PLEX allows you to code these agents. So I coded something called TGC bundle, which pulls data from their website and populates PLEX. It uses HTML parser to parse the course web page for metadata and handle the Unicode characters. I actually found code from Aaron Schwartz that allowed really easy manipulation of Unicode characters into PLEX. I also use Beautiful Soup because it's much easier than HTML parser. It's 2 lines and you can find what you need in a web page. URLib2, regular expressions to create a search algorithm because PLEX reads the file names, and so if the file name isn't exactly what the course name is, you need a way to search the website to find the course name for that. And there's also, you can add a course number, and that's a unique identifier to a course, so that will always find it. And SSL to handle the SSL handshake with the website. So the features are, it matches based on course number or partial course title. It pulls course description, lecture name, cover art, background art, subject lecture sums, a bunch of stuff, and it populates PLEX. So here's an example of some of my courses, and that's it.
So let's give Vincent another round of applause. And with that, I also wanted to thank again all of the speakers